All right, so this deep dive, this one takes us into some pretty wild territory.
Oh, yeah.
You guys sent us this fascinating interview with a pastor
Yeah.
this used to be a big-time music producer.
Wow.
In the hip-hop world.
No kidding.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack his journey.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, can music be a conduit for both good and evil spiritual forces?
It's a question that has haunted artists and theologians for centuries.
Right?
And this pastor's story, let's throw some serious fuel on that fire.
Exactly. I mean, his story takes us from a divine spark of musical talent straight into the heart of Diddy's world with a whole lot of spiritual struggle along the way.
Yeah, and it raises some important questions for us as listeners, too.
Like what?
Like, how does the music we listen to affect us spiritually? Can we even tell if music is carrying, let's say, a darker energy?
Okay, so let's dive into this pastor's story.
Okay.
He talks about his father, also a pastor, bestowing the gift of music on him at just 12 years old. It's like, boom! Suddenly he's overflowing with musical talent, teaching herself piano and organ. Like, it's second nature.
What's fascinating here is that even as a kid, he's not just playing music.
Right.
He's got that entrepreneurial spirit. He gets a workstation.
Wow.
Starts making beats and is selling them to local rappers.
Really?
Talk about a prodigy with a hustle.
Right, and that hustle takes him to a huge talent search.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like the American Idol of its day, run by Andre Harrell, who was a major player in the industry. So you can see this guy's aiming for the top.
It's like that classic tale of ambition meeting opportunity.
All right.
But then, just as things are heating up, he has this experience that really throws a wrench in the works.
What happened?
So he's at home working on rap lyrics, and he describes them as typical stuff.
Okay.
You know, profanity, violence.
Yeah.
And then he hears a voice telling him to burn those lyrics.
Whoa.
Yeah. This is where that question of spiritual influence comes into play, right?
Right.
He instantly knows it's God speaking to him. And despite his ambitions, he actually obeys.
Really?
He burns the lyrics. But here's the thing. He doesn't quit music entirely.
Okay.
He figures, okay, I can still produce beats, just keep the content clean.
Interesting. So almost like trying to make a deal with his conscience.
Yeah, but you have to wonder, can you really compartmentalize your faith like that? Especially in an industry as, let's say, spiritually charged as the music world.
Well, that's what makes his next move so interesting.
What's that?
Through his connections, he catches the attention of P. Diddy. Bad boy records the whole 9 yards.
Whoa, way.
Yeah, he sells a beat for $7,000, which for a young guy is a life-changing amount of money.
And it's not just the money. It's the whole lifestyle that comes with it.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about Diddy pulling up in a Ferrari parties in Miami.
It's like a movie.
It's easy to see how that world could pull someone in.
Totally.
Especially someone who's already wrestling with their faith.
Totally. But even while living this glamorous life, he's still feeling that tug from God. Telling him to walk away, he describes it as going crazy, like he's being torn in two different directions.
This raises an important question for all of us, I think. Have you ever felt that internal conflict, that sense of knowing something isn't right?
Oh, yeah.
Even when it looks incredibly appealing on the surface.
Oh, absolutely. But for him, it gets even more intense.
What do you mean?
He starts to talk about the darker side of music creation. How it's not just about talent, but about tapping into something beyond yourself.
Okay.
Something in the spiritual realm.
That's where this story takes a turn into some seriously unsettling territory.
Yeah, he goes on to describe these marathon studio sessions.
Wait, how long are we talking?
Working for days on end without sleep.
Really?
Driven by what he believes was a demonic influence he needed to be in that dark headspace to access certain sounds and creativity.
It's chilling, right? The idea that what we often consider artistic inspiration might actually be manipulation from a darker spiritual force.
And it's not just his own experience. He talks about witnessing ritualistic practices in studios, chanting over music candles, almost like a seance.
Wow, so this isn't just about late nights and creative energy.
No.
It's venturing into some seriously spooky stuff.
This really challenges the image we have of the music industry, doesn't it?
It does.
Suddenly, behind the glitz and glamour,
Yeah.
we see a world where spiritual forces might be at play, both good and bad.
So here we have this guy stuck between the allure of success and the conviction that he's playing with fire, spiritually speaking.
Right.
And that conflict is only going to escalate from here.
Yeah, it's a real crossroads, isn't it?
It is.
The pull of ambition versus that inner voice telling you something's not right. I think we've all faced those choices, maybe not with the same stakes.
Right.
but that internal battle is something we can all relate to.
Yeah. It's like, how do you walk away from something that promises you everything you've ever wanted, even when you feel like it might cost you your soul?
And in this pastor's case, it takes a pretty dramatic event to push him to that breaking point.
Oh, it all goes down in Las Vegas, which, let's be honest, is kind of the perfect setting for a story like this.
Talk about symbolic, right? The city of excess temptation around every corner.
Yeah.
And he's there for a party surrounded by music industry giants, Diddy, Dr. Dre, the whole crew.
This is it, the moment he's been working towards.
Yeah, right.
Surrounded by the people who represent the pinnacle of success in his world, and yet he hits a wall. He just can't do it anymore.
Wow.
He walks away from the party, from the connections, from everything he's built.
That takes serious guts to turn your back on that level of success.
It does.
And it wasn't easy. He describes having a complete breakdown on the Vegas Strip, sobbing uncontrollably. It's like the weight of that decision, the fear of the unknown just crashed down on him.
But what's interesting is even in that moment of despair, he makes a deal with God. He said, if you get me out of this, I'll obey you.
Wow.
It's like a surrender, a plea for guidance when he feels totally lost.
And then things take an even wilder turn. He says he starts getting threats not just directed at him, but at his family, at his church. It's like the industry he tried to leave is reaching back to pull him in with a darker energy.
This highlights something really important about this story.
What's that?
It's not just about personal choices. It's about systems of power, about forces that can be incredibly difficult to escape.
It makes you wonder how much of what we see in the music industry, the drama, the scandals, might be tied to these deeper spiritual battles.
It's a question worth considering.
It is.
But for this pastor, the threats suddenly stop after he makes that pact with God.
Really?
It's like a sign, a confirmation that he's on the right path, even though he's terrified.
But his story doesn't end there.
Oh.
He tries to go back to music thinking he can do it on his own terms, create clean music, stay away from the darker side of the industry. But the allure of that world, that hunger for success, it proves too strong.
It speaks to the power of temptation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even when you've had a profound spiritual experience, those desires, those old patterns can be incredibly hard to break.
And that leads him to a recording studio in Houston where things take a truly dark turn.
Uh-oh.
He's offered marijuana cookies, and not thinking clearly, he ends up eating way too many.
This can't be good.
It's not. He starts hallucinating, enters what he described as a red room.
A red room.
It's dark, oppressive,
Yeah.
and he encounters demonic figures who taunt him about his faith.
It's like something straight out of a horror movie, this descent into a terrifying spiritual realm. And what's striking is how real it feels to him. It's not just a bad trip, it's an attack on his core beliefs.
Exactly. These demonic figures mock him, tell him Jesus can't hear him. And it's not just psychological. He starts having physical symptoms. His heart races, his blood pressure spikes. He ends up unconscious, rushed to the hospital.
This is where that connection between the spiritual and physical becomes really clear. The trauma of this experience manifests in his body in a way that doctors can't even explain.
And think about this. You're lying in a hospital bed. Doctors are baffled. You're convinced you're going crazy because you've messed with forces you don't understand. That's got to be terrifying.
Absolutely. It's a feeling of complete vulnerability, of losing control. Yeah. But then something amazing happens.
What's that?
His pastors arrive at the hospital. He's still unconscious, but he can hear them praying over him, speaking in tongues. And he describes this wave of peace washing over him, the torment just vanishing.
It's a powerful testament to the power of prayer, of spiritual support, even when he couldn't consciously reach out that community, that faith was there to lift him up.
Yeah.
And it's in that moment of clarity that he knows he needs a definitive sign from God, a clear indication that he's meant to leave music behind for good. And wouldn't you know it, as he's leaving the hospital, he finds a cassette tape titled The Truth Behind Hip Hop. It's like a message delivered right to his doorstep.
It's hard to deny the synchronicity of that moment right after everything he's been through. It's like a confirmation that he's on the right path, even though it means giving up a dream he'd been chasing for so long.
So he walks away from secular music, but his journey isn't over. He enters the gospel music scene hoping for a pure environment. But what he discovers there throws a whole new wrench into the equation.
And that's where we'll dive in for the final part of this deep dive. The question is, can you really escape those darker forces, even in the world of gospel music?
So you'd think, okay, he's left the secular music world behind.
Right.
Now he's in the gospel scene.
Yeah.
Surely it's all peace and light from here on out, right?
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, gospel music is all about faith, inspiration, connecting with the divine. But what this pastor finds is that the reality is a lot more complicated.
Yeah, he straight up says, They're almost one and the same. You've got to decide which side of the table you want to sit on. It's like, whoa, hold on. You're telling me the gospel music industry has the same dark underbelly as the secular world.
It's a pretty shocking statement, right? But he goes on to describe encountering the same issues he saw before people getting ripped off, ego trips, cutthroat competition.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, the devil can quote scripture. Just because something is labeled gospel doesn't mean it's automatically coming from a place of pure spiritual intention.
It makes you think about how easily we can get fooled by appearances. We see a gospel singer belting out a powerful song, and we assume it's coming from a place of deep faith.
Right.
But maybe, just maybe, there's something else going on behind the scenes.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. It's not enough to just listen to the music and take it at face value.
Yeah.
We have to be more discerning, more critical. What's the motivation behind the music? What's the energy it's carrying?
So how do we even begin to figure that out? I mean, it's not like there's a spiritual litmus test for music.
That's the challenge, isn't it? And in this interview, the two pastors have a really thought-provoking conversation about what actually makes music truly gospel. They go beyond the lyrics, beyond the genre, and talk about the importance of the manifestation of the Holy Spirit in the creation process.
Now, I know that phrase might sound a little out there for some people.
Yeah.
But basically, they're saying that music created with genuine spiritual inspiration will have a different quality, a different power than music that's just trying to imitate that sound.
It's like the difference between someone who's truly passionate about something and someone who's just going through the motions.
Right.
You can feel the authenticity, the depth of emotion in the way they express themselves. And these pastors are saying that same principle applies to music.
They even bring up the story of David playing the harp for King Saul and how the music would drive away evil spirits. It's like music can have a real tangible effect on the spiritual atmosphere.
And think about how often music is used in spiritual practices across different cultures and religions, chanting, drumming, singing. It's all about tapping into something beyond ourselves, connecting with something bigger.
So if we take what these pastors are saying seriously, it means we need to be a lot more conscious about the music we choose to listen to.
Absolutely.
It's not just background noise. It's something that can influence our thoughts, our emotions, even our spiritual state.
Exactly. And it raises a whole bunch of questions, doesn't it? Can you actually sense the difference between music created with genuine spiritual inspiration and music that's just trying to sound holy? Does the intention of the artist matter? What about the listener's intention?
It's a lot to think about, and honestly, there might not be easy answers, but this deep dive for me has been a real eye-opener. It makes you realize that music is a powerful force, and we need to be aware of the energy it's carrying, whether it's light or darkness.
And ultimately, I think it comes down to listening to our own intuition. What feels uplifting? What feels draining? What resonates with our own spiritual values? Those are the questions worth asking ourselves as we navigate this complex and fascinating world of music.
So there you have it. A deep dive into the spiritual side of the music industry. It's a wild ride full of twists and turns, and it definitely leaves you with a lot to ponder. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so feel free to share your own experiences and reflections. Thanks for joining us.